Hey y'all, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about parts work, which parts work has to do with those of y'all that are doing shadow work and are familiar with your shadow. And for those of y'all that are new to shadow work, this is great to have in your awareness as you go into shadow work. So this video will have little nuggets of information for people across the board. So when doing parts work, a really powerful way to do it is to get into like a meditative state, especially for those of y'all that are versed in meditating or journeying within yourself, kind of like shamanic journeying, journeying within your mind, within the realms of your mind, the realms of your soul. And if you need a little help and guidance on this, I do have a video that I released on YouTube for guided meditations with parts work. My channel is Gypsy Sky Synergy on YouTube. Gypsy Sky Synergy. And the playlist it's on is guided meditations. And that might be a little easier way to get into it in case you can't quite guide yourself into that space, because it takes a lot of practice to get to that level. And do it in a coherent way. So anyways, parts work. When you're working with your parts, you might find that you become really versed in your parts and you understand, you're like, man, I have an inner critic, I have an inner naysayer, I have an inner martyr, I have an inner savior. Just recently, as I was doing parts work and I decided to like pull out of my feminine energies a bit and like lean into my masculine energies a bit and do parts work, I realized there was like an inner Puritan and an inner colonizer who stemmed out of like the inner masculine, but like the unhealed part of the inner masculine, which to me, like, the feminine and the masculine have a full spectrum. Just like in astrology, all the signs have a full spectrum. Humans have a full spectrum, right? And we live in a polarity world, so there's going to be like that, like black and white and gray to get to the black and white, right? You got to go through the gray. Well, you don't have to. A lot of people choose not to, but that's the shadow work, which is why you're watching this, right? So anyways, the inner masculine has a full spectrum, so you could have like the divine masculine and like the healthier masculine traits, or the divine feminine and the healthier feminine traits, or as most of us start off when we're doing shadow work, we're in the like unhealthier traits of the masculine and the feminine, right? And so as I was doing parts work, I was like, oh wow, there's like an inner Puritan, which like I'm like, whoa, that's fascinating, because I've been doing work around religious programming for a while, and it's kind of like hidden in plain view. The mind's really good at like keeping stuff safely tucked away until you're ready to access it, right? And like these parts, they might present themselves to you in this meditative state of like journeying within yourself to access these parts. They might present with different titles, different labels, different archetypes. You might even find you name them. That's totally fine, as long as you have some type of label that makes sense to you, a simple label that makes sense to you, then you can do the parts work. And the concept is like, once you find a part that you're identifying, so I'll keep this as simple as possible. Once you find a part that you've identified, that you're working with, let's do inner critic, because I feel like that's one that a lot of people resonate with. So you have your inner critic and you're like, gosh, they're always like so critical of me, and maybe the inner critic even has like a twin part, the inner perfectionist, right? Because they kind of rip off of each other. And so you have your inner critic, inner perfectionist, and you recognize them, you recognize the behavior, you recognize how meticulous you can be, you recognize how perfectionistic you can be, you recognize how critical you can be, both to yourself and to others. Maybe you're at the point where you recognize, like, you're like, man, this person's like so critical of me, they like put such extreme pressure on me, and then you're like beginning to realize like, oh my god, I'm so critical of myself, I put so much pressure on myself, like they're mirroring me back to me, I see it now, it's not them, it's me, right? Or maybe you're in part of the journey where you understand the mirroring and you think you've worked through it, and you just like hit a whole new layer of like, oh my gosh, like the things that I'm like mad at with my partner, like are parts within myself that I haven't even tapped into, right? Like you're like, I'm so critical of my partner, and here I think I want what's best for them, but maybe what's best for them isn't really what's best for them. It's really your inner perfectionist trying to make them perfectly be the partner you want them to be, right? The parts will show up in different ways. So anyways, wherever you are in your shadow journey, you'll kind of know what to kind of keep an eye out for, or what's already showing up. And once you've identified the inner critic, the inner perfectionist, then what you can do with it in this meditative state, this very intentional state, like setting the intention to go into this state and to do parts work, setting the intention to do parts work. You go in there and you have a conversation with these parts of yourself, and you're like, hey, inner perfectionist, like, when you have me adhere to perfectionism, it makes it really hard for me to get started on projects, because I get paralyzed by fear that I'm not going to do it right, and then I get paralyzed by the fear of failure, and then I just don't do it. And I feel like it's really robbing me of some joys in life. And like, my soul incarnated here to experience joy, and my soul incarnated here because we've done perfectionism long enough in other lives that like it's making it really hard for us to pull out of like these incarnations, because we're wearing a canyon of like a samskara, emotional imprint, into like our souls, like akashics, that we can't quite climb out of. And now that I'm aware of this, like, it would be really cool if like you would just tone down the perfectionism a bit. Like, okay, maybe I typoed in a text message and put there, THERE, when I meant to do there, THEIR. Can you please not beat me up about that? Like, I got bullied enough in life, by myself, by others. Like, can you just turn into like my inner cheerleader? Can you cheer me on and cheer me through those moments where like I don't necessarily have everything perfect in my delivery? I would really appreciate that. Hey, inner critic, instead of criticizing me, can you like coach me? I would really appreciate if you would coach me. Like, when you're putting me down, and when you're putting down like those relationships around me that I actually want, like, I want love, I want a loving relationship, I want a romantic partnership, I want really good friends. I don't want to be like critical of these people. I don't want to push them away because I have unhealed like wounds within myself. Can you like help coach me through healing those parts of myself that you came from? I recognize that like the inner critic and inner perfectionist were born from a place of like self-preservation and trying to survive at a time where we really needed to be critical or perfect. I recognize that, and I honor you, and I'm so sorry that we had to go through that experience, but that's not where we're at anymore. And my vision that I'm holding, like abundance or like wealth, or just like living a nice life with quality time with quality people that I love, like there's not room for perfectionism or criticism in that. And it would just be nicer if you would just coach me into it in ways that I didn't have growing up, and it would make it easier for me to obtain this vision, to embody like this manifestation, to receive this manifestation, if you would do that for me. So like, you go inside of yourself and you have very real conversations with yourself, and you'll do this with each part that comes up. And sometimes you'll find one part has like 5 other parts that were born from it, and so you're going to conversate with all these parts, and then you're going to do some type of integrative practice with them in your visualization, where like you can integrate them into you, which I find sometimes it really helps to call in like a cloud or a ball of like source energy or light, and immerse them in this after you've had the conversation. And just imagine the light, kind of like when a storm comes in after like a really dry season, the light comes in and it really just like brings life to these new parts that are now shifting into these new roles. It really gives them like that like energy to shift into these new roles, and then the light really like burns off and moves out like the emotional residue and behavior patterns that these roles are leaving behind. Because at the end of the day, these parts were created to protect you. They weren't created to sabotage you, and sometimes they need to like be reminded that they're here for you, and they can be here for you by changing the roles that they play in your psyche. And so yeah, if you find this intriguing, definitely check out that meditation that I made on YouTube, because that might really be a great way to help you weave within yourself and further understand what I'm talking about. Because of time constraints, the video is about to cut out, and I feel like there's so much more that I could say on this. And if you would like me to say more on this, please like leave a comment and let me know, so that way I can talk more about it. I'm huge on parts work right now in my journey, and so I love sharing what I learn as it comes up for me, because I believe in transparency and authenticity. Anywho, I hope you have a great day or evening wherever you are, and be well. Thank you so much for showing up for yourself today.